In part 2 of Module 5's lecture, we're going to be talking about the following bullet points here. We're going to talk about color evaluation, press checks or color OKs, evaluating the press form, and trade customs. So first of all, we need to understand that print can be very, very expensive. Items like books and magazines, catalogs, may be not as frequently used for many of us as in times past. I don't think that most of you, especially those of you who are younger students, may not have ever used a catalog before or read a magazine in print, but I'm sure you're aware of what they are. So catalogs especially have been on the great decline, but it's still something that gets printed. And the other items, and there are other up-and-coming items too that are being printed as well. Print is not dead, but that's a topic for a different class. There's still a lot of print being done, and print can be very, very expensive. And so if your function is operating as a representative for a print buyer, then you need to be very cognizant of the processes that are involved in achieving accurate color at the press. Color, as we know, can be very subjective. A client that we're representing on a color OK or a press check, they may have very strict requirements for meeting certain color tolerances as their brand colors or important elements of visual design or whatever. So regardless, we need to just be aware of the process. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So there are certain images that are descriptive images, meaning depending on the type of thing being printed, what the print job is, that can vary. It may be an image of a product on some packaging. It may be the catalogs that we mentioned before that are not used quite as much now, but maybe some direct mail. It could be an annual report. It could be any number of things that are being printed that have descriptive color images. What I mean by that is the color of the images or the color of the content in the print is descriptive. It needs to be accurate. It's really important that it be representative of the product in the image and it's accurate. So when embarking on a big print job like that, if you're representing a print buyer, these print jobs can be, like I said before, very, very expensive. And ideally, you want this work to be part of a long-term relationship where a print buyer may work with a specific printer over a period of years and years because they have a good working relationship with that printer. So some things that can be done to establish a good working relationship with a printer is for the representative to first tour the print facility. Part of the sales process may involve visiting a little bit of wine and dining and touring the print facility and getting familiar with the staff and the facility and their capabilities, their equipment, and so on. A major print purchase would be treated just like any other major purchase. If you're buying a house, then you're going to bring someone to inspect along with you. If you're buying a car, a used car, for example, you may want to have your mechanic take a look at it first. You don't want to just make the purchase on the behalf of the print buyer based on comments of a salesperson. Not that salespeople are untrustworthy by nature. It's just that it's someone else's money and you need to be using that with good judgment. A print job is not a product that you can just pick from one printer and it's going to be the same as if you buy it from another printer. Every print job is custom made based on the specifications of that job and the content of that print job. So some things you can do to prepare, because you need to prepare for a color OK or a press check, is to always take notes. Whether you do that digitally in a video, audio recording, on a notepad, whatever. Any meeting you have with your client, with the print buyer, with designers, with anybody involved in the content production process or creative, keep notes of that. That's going to be important information. Review those prior to a color OK and bring those notes along with you on the color OK as well. And throughout the process, reference those notes, reference the material, reference the information that you have about what the buyer gave you and also about the process of that press check. You're going to want to provide feedback to the management team afterwards. You're going to want to provide feedback to the print buyer as well. And you're going to want to take advantage of information gained at the beginning of this process, a press OK or a color OK may be hours and hours long. It can take quite a long time, especially depending on the complexity of the print job. A large print job with lots of various content in it and color critical images may require many hours of work to achieve a color OK. And so that long process may require you to reference information from the beginning later on in the process. You should also always be aware of lighting conditions. We've talked about this previously. You've read about it. You've discussed it. We need to be aware that the viewing conditions that we're viewing our press information in is consistent. It's color corrected. It's 5000K lighting is what we ideally want to use. We want to use that D50 lighting if possible. There are lots of things that can affect your perception and color acuity, and metamerism can be one of those. A REM color light indicator strip, which we've talked about before, can help you identify the lighting conditions that you're viewing it in, because it's intentionally taking advantage of metamerism so that you can see strips on that little sticker. And if you see the strips, you know that you're not currently under the correct lighting conditions to view that with. So it's a good idea to bring those with you on a color OK. Ideally, you want to use a color control bar. Well, not ideally. I say it's a requirement. You have to have a color control bar. Color control bar is going to be some information that would print outside of the trim marks of the actual print job. That color control bar is going to give information that can be used with instrumentation like a densitometer, a colorimeter, spectrophotometer to evaluate things like doubling, slur, trap, TVI, or dot gain. And the press operator or customer service or whoever, the color technician that is there assisting, they're going to be the ones evaluating that information. But if that's not there, then a color check is kind of irrelevant. You need to have that information so that your instrumentation can be used to take advantage of. Press forms are what I referenced earlier on, showing you in the previous lecture, lecture 1 for this module. A press form is going to have information on it. And also that form can be the actual print job laid out in a specific way. It's going to be imposed so that you see page order. And one thing to be aware of when that press form is laid out for you like that is that certain images may be in line with other images. When the final page is trimmed down to your finished piece, you may not see these issues, but when it's all in line on the press sheet, there may be a very dark image in line with a very light image, and that can cause problems because the ink density and the color that's built up there to make one image look good is going to in turn make the other image look bad. And so that may require some adjustments in correcting for that color balance where you choose which image is the more critical. Registration is something that should be addressed at the very beginning of the process. So the little image that you see over there on the right is kind of an exaggerated digital version of misregistration. Registration marks, you've probably seen these whether you realize it or not. If you flip up the tabs on your cereal box, you see those little registration marks, those symbols that look like that. All it is a little target that prints with all 4 colors of ink, one right on top of each other in a very fine hairline pattern. And if any of those printers, the individual CMYK printers within the press, are out of alignment with each other, as those sheets go through there, then you're going to see an issue with alignment on a registration mark like that. And that's going to cause issues with line work in art. It's going to cause issues with images, but especially with color, because if you have misregistration, it's going to be very difficult to correct color issues. So you always want to make sure that the registration is fixed prior to dealing with any color issues. In addition, it's just a good practice to check all the type for various reasons. If you're the last man standing to check for typos or issues where text may have got dropped out of a design or any other problems that should have all been signed off on before, it's just a good idea to check that. In addition, as you're viewing that, you may find that to correct color in one area of a page, a press sheet, changes are made to the ink, which is going to cause type to be darker in one area than a different area. So you want to address those kind of issues up front. Other elements to be aware of, specific high critical or highly important images or elements of a design or a print job to be aware of are not necessarily in order of importance, but high up there is corporate logos. Those are definitely going to be important. Products themselves, products where color is critical. Things like food, clothing, brand colors. Imagine a box of hair dye that you buy at the grocery store, and the color is off a little bit on that. I personally haven't ever bought hair dye, but I can imagine I'd probably be unhappy if I got a color that I didn't see on the package. So the color is critical for certain things more than others. So it's good to identify in advance what are the critical elements of the print where color is essential. And then you may make compromises in other areas where less essential background elements aren't quite as critical. Certain types of printing equipment is going to affect this as well. So, for example, on a web press, they run extremely fast. And as a result of their speed, they're very efficient at printing a lot of material. The downside to that is that if it takes you a long time to achieve color on a web press, you've gone through a lot of waste. They can't get up to speed and up to color without wasting a certain amount. And so you need to establish a time frame to reach color, establish a number of impressions to say at this point we will have achieved color, and if we haven't got it, then we're going to go with whatever we have at that point, because that waste becomes extremely expensive at the speed that a web press can run. Another thing to be aware of is trade customs, and this is kind of similar to specifications and standards that we talked about before, but not exactly. These are general daily business practices that are going to be addressing things like the working relationship between the printer and the person doing the press check, or the customer and the press tech. It's going to also address technology that's being used relative to that specific job. These are not laws, but they are established to an extent that they will hold up in a court of law. They've been around for quite a long time, since the 20s. These are actual, I keep wanting to say standards, but they're not standards, but they've been around since 1922, and they're kept up to date by the Printing Industries of America, PIA. So those trade customs will show up on most customer-facing documents, including quote sheets and things like that. So a customer service representative, a salesperson, they're going to point those out and make sure that you're up to date on those trade customs. It's going to include topics that relate to your specific job and things you need to be aware of to avoid confusion, misunderstandings, and disagreements about a job being completed.